Hey, I'm John with EDMProd, and today we're going to talk about drum layering. Before we really dive into the technical how-to part of this, I want to talk about something that honestly I think is more important when it comes to layering any sound, and that is the why. Why are you layering it? Too often I see many students coming in with sounds that just don't really make sense being slapped on top of each other. For example, two kicks where the low end is conflicting and creating phase cancellation, or we've got 3 or 4 layers of basically the exact same snare. What's the point of adding all these things on top of each other? Oftentimes it can actually hurt the sound as opposed to contributing to it. So I think it's very important when we talk about layering to understand the why behind it as opposed to just understanding how to do it or thinking that you need to do it every time because some YouTube video said that you should. When you're adding a layer to a sound, you should think of it as adding a piece of the puzzle that's not quite there yet. For example, if I have a kick that's a bit dull, I'm not going to go grab another kick there's a big dull thumpy body and slap it on top. I'm probably going to try and find something that can add a little more front edge attack. Maybe some brightness, maybe a little bit of air to the kick if that's what I'm going for. And if I have a snare that's all body and none of the tail, then what I want to look for is a sample that can add that tail to the sound. The body is already there. What I'm looking for is the missing piece. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive on in. I've got this kick here, and in my opinion, it's a fairly dull, thumpy kick. It's a good sounding one though. So what I want to do is add a little more front edge attack to this. Typically what I can do is find some other kick and sort of steal the transient from it. The transient is the front edge of the kick. I've got this club kick here, and I think it's got a pretty good front edge to the attack. I like that. Now obviously I don't need anything but that little bit in the front. So easy enough, I can just go ahead and press Command E and cut it out. Fade the edge like that. And let's add these two together to see what it sounds like now. Without the click and with it. I think that sounds pretty good. Sometimes what I'll do is add a little bit of saturation to this just to squish those sounds together and make them feel like they're a bit more joined. And this is entirely dependent on whether it affects the sound in a way that I like. Another option for a kick layer would be something that's kind of stompy and wide and dirty to give the kick less of a clean, synthesized feel. For this, I really just look for stomp type samples. Okay, here's a great stompy sound. It's got some stereo image to it. One thing I need to watch out for is that I don't get conflict between the low end. So what I'd probably want to do in this situation is to take the lows out of this and maybe make it a bit shorter as well, because this hangs over quite a long time after the original kick is done. In order to make these feel like they're a bit more connected and part of the same signal, then I'm going to want to make it shorter to match the length. We could also fade the front off of it as well in order to keep this transient we've created nice and clean and clear. This is something that I do all the time when I'm stacking drum sounds up, because a lot of times the drums can have a buildup on the front edge if you have a bunch of transients that are stacking up over top of each other. So go ahead and fade the front off a little bit just to leave room for this to pop through. And let's see what this sounds like in context with the kick. Without it, with it, not bad. It's a little loud though, so easy enough. Just turn down the volume of that channel. And I think that adds a lot of really nice texture and body and character to this kick. At this point, what I'll typically do is just make a new audio channel, set the input on the channel to kick, and resample it. Now I've got my new custom kick, and I can go ahead and turn off all of the old channels and just use this. So those are two of the reasons why I might want to layer a kick. I do want to say, what I see a lot is people layering kicks like this. They'll find two that have a nice big chunky body to it, like that. and maybe like that. So adding two kicks together like this can be a problem. The reason why is because these waveforms might fall in and out of phase and cause phase cancellation. Independently, these each sound pretty decent. But when I add them together, it gets a bit slappy and rumbly sounding. Let's go ahead and resample onto this audio channel and you'll see what we got here is a kick that looks pretty wonky compared to the original two that we used. That's because we're getting phase cancellation and then also phase addition. And it's kind of rotating back and forth between cancellation and addition. When I say phase cancellation, what I mean is if you take a look at these waveforms here. So we have the top one where both the waveforms are going up to down, and the bottom one where both the waveforms are going down to up, right along here. They're pretty much perfectly opposite for this one moment. And when you add those two together, then it's going to negate to almost zero, which is what's going on right here. And you get this really kind of rough, wobbly sounding low end that is perhaps what you're going for, but in most cases, probably not. So just be very careful when layering kicks because you can get this happening really easily. A solution for this is to EQ out the low end on one of these kicks. Something like that. And if we resample again, we can see that a little bit of that cancellation is still happening, but nowhere near as much. One final trick I wanted to show about layering kicks is one that I use all the time. Let's find another nice thumpy kick here. Okay, here's another kick that doesn't have much of a front edge to it. What I love to do to kicks like this is to add something like a hi-hat or a little percussive hit on the front edge. I've got this little teeny tiny clicky closed hat here. With these two layered on top of each other, sounds like that. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll cut a little of the tail of this hat and play around with the pitch of it too. And the volume. Something like that. That can really help to add to the front edge of a kick. And there is one other trick that I use that I feel like you're not really supposed to do this. Or at least I've always been told you're not supposed to do this, but I do it anyway and it works well. Let's just go ahead and drag this down here. So I'm going to put it into a simpler. And I'll make a note to play this kick back. C3. Let's turn off this clicky hi-hat here for now. There we go. One great way to add a little more click onto your kick. It's not really a layering technique, but it can be helpful once I layer in this clicky hi-hat again, is to start the playback not on the zero crossing, but like somewhere away from the zero crossing. And now we just added that click back into it because you get that click if the audio file starts not on the zero crossing point. I think it works pretty well, especially when you pair that with something like a hi-hat for a little more front edge texture on your kick. Okay, so that's good on kicks. Before we move on to snares, I just want to mention that if you want to find a great pack of free drum samples, you can head on over to EDMProd's free download section. There's a link to that in the description below. There's a lot of drum samples and, of course, tons of others for lots of different genres. If you look over here in my browser, we can see we have an ambient sample pack, analog, D&B, EDM, Foley, tons and tons of free samples, and lots of free learning resources as well. So head on over to EDMProd to check that out. All right, let's move on to layering snares. This is the big one. I find that I layer my snares up in almost every track, whereas I don't always have to layer my kicks. Usually it's because I find a kick sample that I just really like and I work with that. But snares, I don't think I've ever written a track where I didn't layer them up in order to provide more punch, more texture, more interest in the sound. Let's just start off with a standard, really kind of boring snare. Something like an 808. Just your classic, whatever snare. Now, how you layer your snares is going to depend entirely on your goals. Like, what are you trying to do? If you want more of like a splashy tail to it, you might want to find something that has a little more psh or white noise tail. I find that the DS snare device is great for adding in layers and portions to a sample So let's go ahead and grab that and take a listen to it. So I've already got kind of this 808 type snare, right? I think that this may be based off of an 808. What I'm really looking for here is more of that noise and a little bit less of the body of it. But I can't really get rid of that low tone, so this is where I'm going to grab an EQ and just cut it out. I don't want any of that. I just want this top end tail. There we are. Let's add this as a layer. And maybe we want to add a clap for a little bit of stereo width. That's something else that I add all the time using the DS drum synth. The DS clap is great because each time it hits, it's a little bit different and it splashes the sound around to the left and the right speaker. But I'm going to go ahead and tighten it up quite a bit. It's a little sloppy currently, so I'll turn sloppy down. I'll turn the tail down. And I'll tune it up higher so I get a brighter sound. And let's turn the decay time down. I've already got a nice long decay on this tail. Got a decent body on this sound. I'm really just looking for a little bit of crispiness on this sound. Let's see what that sounds like as a layer. There we go. If I want, I can press Command B and bounce both of these sounds to audio. And play around with the timing of it a little bit as well. Like, let's move this ahead so that we get kind of like a little whip up into the snare. That's another great reason to add a layer, is to add a pre-snare. And that pre-snare sound can really help the snare feel as though it's whipping up into it. Also, I might want to fade a little bit of this attack out as well, since I don't want it to conflict with the transient that I already have for the initial snare we used. Another layer we can add on is just some Foley, something to give the snare a little character or interest. I made this file a while back called Bunch of Crunchy Foley. Forget where I got it from. But what I'm going to do is scope this out and just kind of find some interesting points that I can layer onto the snare. Like already I think that might be kind of cool. So I'm going to grab it, chop it out, and sort of fade the edge out here. Maybe I'll make it a little bit shorter, bit louder, and move this initial attack backwards a bit away from the front edge. There we go. Next thing I need to do is get rid of that low junk. I'm kind of adding in a lot of lows through all these layers. So it's important to keep carving away all the stuff you don't need to make sure that you're not getting a buildup of lows or overlapping frequencies. That's nice. Some low junk right in here. You can probably boost a little of this 10K as well, just to brighten the sound up. Nothing but noise on this. We already cut the lows out of it. And let's look at the original snare. Yeah, not a whole lot going on down there, but that's okay. I'm probably going to high pass it anyway. Like so. Might turn down the noise tail. It's a bit loud. And also probably a little bit too long. So let's just go ahead and cut it and add a fade. So we took this snare from just a really boring 808 to something that has a lot more character. And I could have gone any number of directions with this. This is just kind of the way that I went right here. And as long as you're following the guidelines of making sure that there are not any sounds overlapping that really aren't contributing to the overall texture, then you should be good. You know, for example, one thing you might want to watch out for is layering up really heavy snares like this that are kind of the same composition. I'm going to lower the volume on them so they don't clip. The addition of one of these snares to the other isn't really doing too much to help it overall, aside from just making it louder. This is a really good example of a sound that just like is begging to be layered. Let's find a clap and put that on top of it. So this has a lot of great tail to it. but also a lot of front edge slap. I don't really need that front edge slap because this little snare, rim shot snare that I'm using, already is taking care of that. I want the knock from that combined with the tail from that, so all I'm going to do is cut some of the front edge off of the clap and add it to the snare. Like so. I'm going to also pitch this up a bit to make it a little bit tighter. Without that tail, and with it. It's got more room, got more tone, got a little more splash at the end. Really good example of some simple basic layering to achieve a different snare sound.